50 years of our lives at work. That's more time than we spend with our families. Yet the irony is, only 1 in 10 of us are engaged at work. Work is failing for many to provide a sense of belonging. It's become a transaction, a paycheck, a place devoid of empathy. Why should we accept this? I want to show you another way. I want to show you today how more empathic companies are more profitable. How you can start to measure empathy in your own organisations and increase empathy through what I call empathy nudges, these small things that really make a big difference to your company. And when you're talking about empathy, you really got to focus on the detail, because no detail is too small. We need to look at every process, every image, every word, every algorithm. And when you walk out of here, I would love you to see your own workplace through the lens of empathy. But first I want to show you how not to do it. This image, this guy is a Twitter employee. The way he found out he was made redundant, he walked in one day and all of a sudden he couldn't log on to his Twitter account. It's kind of like the corporate equivalent of being dumped by text. This image was used by one of the world's biggest American companies, and it was used to celebrate those staff who had devoted 25 years of their lives to the organisation. But they couldn't be bothered to find pictures of everyone. Oops. And just imagine that you are a young, aspiring career woman and you're searching for images on Google of CEOs. You scroll through a picture of a man, and another man, and another man, and the first female you see is CEO Barbie. So ladies, it appears to smash the glass ceiling, we needed a waist of 18 inches and a ridiculous wardrobe. Okay. Now, I want to be really clear with my definition of empathy. There's individual empathy and there's organisational empathy. And I want to talk to you today about organisational empathy. That's hard to do with Barbie on the screen, but... And in my experience in business, most business leaders are not psychopaths. You do meet the odd one or two. I'm actually remembering them now. But most business leaders are empathic. It's not the people, it's the system, the culture, the environment, the policies, even the style of meetings that cause empathic people to behave in unempathic ways. My definition of empathy is the emotional impact that a company has on people, so customers and staff, and society. I am not talking about emotionally intelligent organisations. They can have an incredibly high awareness of the issues, but empathic organisations, they are accountable of the issues and what I call empathy in action. I've studied the most empathic organisations in the world. I've asked the question, what makes them empathic? There are 7 key drivers to empathy. Empowerment. When you walk through your office, when you walk into your building, do you really feel that you can make a difference? Authenticity. How different is your home self from your work self? Or can you bring the whole of yourself to work? And belonging. Belonging is at the heart of a really empathic organisation. Belonging is, do you feel part of something? Does your voice get heard? Do you actually feel that you matter? And the problem with the examples that I shared with you is what they're screaming is you don't belong here. It's not just the emotional benefits of more empathic companies, it's the financial benefits. More empathic companies make more money, they're more profitable. In my index that Federico mentioned, the top 10 companies, I run an index, been doing it for a few years, where we measure empathy in companies. And the top 10 companies, they outperform the bottom 10 by 50%. More empathic companies, they deliver more value. Whatever way you cut the numbers, by growth, by earnings, by productivity, there is value there. Technology. For all its grand promises of democratization, it is actually fueling the empathy deficit. With the rise of machine learning, we are seeing empathy become scarcer. And that's because the people who are coding the technology, they've got their own biases, like I've got my own biases. What they do is they just put those biases into the data sets they create. One data set found the word programmer more associated with the word man. And guess what the word that was most associated with women was? Homemaker. When Hewlett-Packard first introduced their facial recognition software, it didn't recognize black faces. Because the people who were testing it were reflective of the Silicon Valley bias, which is white and Asian. When Microsoft first introduced Tay, their AI team chatbot, who was supposed to improve customer service, what happened with Tay was that users started saying misogynistic and racist remarks to Tay, who then started regurgitating them back. That was in 48 hours. And the thing is, the problem with this is that when the technology industry has an empathy bypass, a biased individual can have finite damage. Although Trump is giving us a good run for our money, but a biased algorithm can reach billions. I want technology companies to become more accountable for their algorithms, and I want them to start putting empathy at the heart of their organizations. So if technology is fueling the empathy deficit, who's driving the demand? It's you guys, it's millennials, it's the next generation. I'm currently empathy in residence at a company at the moment where the average age is 25. And you guys are so different at work. You will sacrifice money for meaning. You want emotional recognition. You want the text message that says, you know what, you rocked it in that presentation, you did so well. Our data shows that millennials are 3 times more comfortable talking about their emotions at work with their bosses. I mean, that's just something that I didn't feel comfortable enough doing that when I was their age. But it's so needed in the workplace. And if you think about how many jobs that a millennial or a digital native will have over their working life, it's 20 jobs. 20 jobs. Compared to my generation, which I had only 4. So you guys are much more flexible, much less tethered, and you guys are saying, we want empathy. My journey into empathy was, I used to be a campaigner. I used to be a campaigner to get more women into technology. And a lot of the work we were doing in internal culture was actually benefiting men too, because men want more empathic cultures. Why wouldn't they? And the problem when you talk about gender is that a lot of men don't say anything because they don't want to say the wrong thing. And a lot of the women we were working with, they didn't want to be part of a female-only program. Diversity's weakness is that it emphasizes the other. So I say this as a feminist, that actually gender can divide us, but empathy unites us. The evidence is clear that diversity programs are not effective. One of the biggest technology companies in this world spent $265 million on its diversity program. It has not increased the number of African Americans in 2 years. It's increased the number of women in technical positions by just 1%. So my message to you today is ditch the diversity programs and focus on empathy. But how do you do that? And before you can manage something, you've really got to measure it. And you've got to measure it with the right things. So companies will deceive themselves all the time about their metrics. Now I know this because before I had my Samsung Gear, I would lie to myself that I drank less coffee than I should have. I would lie to myself about how much water I drunk and also how many steps I'd taken. And companies, they will do this all the time with their metrics. They will sit there and they'll trot out their employment engagement scores, their NPS, their customer satisfaction scores, and they will tell me how proud the people in their organisation are to work for the company. They ask the same old questions in the same old way, and they get the same old answers. And staff tell them what they want to hear. Do you feel proud to work for this company? What I want to talk about is the hidden metrics of empathy, because these are things that you guys can start to measure. It's things like blind copies on email, BCC. If your company has a high proportion of blind copy on email, it has a culture of disempowerment. Company politics. We all know those people who weave themselves in the organisation to get to the top. If your company has a high amount of people spending a lot of time on company politics, they are pursuing their own agenda, not growing the company, which is what they should be doing. Another metric is the percentage of time that senior people in a company versus junior people are speaking. Because you don't want your senior people to be speaking all the time. You want to hear ideas from your junior people. Because those are the people, you don't want to create a culture of deference, which is counter to a culture of innovation and empathy. And it's these metrics that will really give you a good understanding of what's going on in your organisation or institution. But where do you start? How do you actually start embedding empathy? This should not be a tick box exercise. How do you really sustain it? I'm going to talk to you about the power of the nudge. And I love nudges. It's taken from behavioural science, but they're really small things that in aggregate will make such a difference to your organisation. It doesn't matter how big or how small. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in the nudges I'm going to share with you. Okay, a bank. A bank. The financial industry is not known for its empathy, is it? What they did is they looked at empathy in language. And language is one of the most important tools that we have because it's how we relate to each other. And they changed the word. They identified that there was an empathy deficit between the head office and the front line, so the branches. And they identified that this was fueling a sense of inequality. The word head means superior. So they changed the name of the head office to support hub. That reinforced that the head office was there to serve the people in the branches. Front line. Front line is a military term. It means first line defence. So who's the enemy? They changed that to front of house. This is just a tiny example. There were 42 different nudges. They've created an empathy unit in the heart of the bank, and they have 3,000 empathy ambassadors. They are really trying to put empathy as part of the soul of the organisation. Okay, meetings. We've all spent time in boring meetings. Well, a food company, what they did was they correlated their low empathy levels to the meeting culture. And you can really tell a lot from a meeting in a company as their empathy levels. And what they did was they found out that all their time, a lot of the people in the organisation were spending all their time in meetings. Death by PowerPoint, massaging egos, and a lot of company politics was going on there. So what they did was a really simple nudge, is they put in stand-up meetings, 15-minute stand-up meetings with a structure, took out the chairs. It really made a difference to the way the meetings were run. People had more time to prepare, and ultimately there was a lot less time to massage egos, which has to be a good thing. This is an example for an advertising agency, and they had really high empathy levels. But actually, what they were doing is they were giving a lot of perks to their people, and they weren't contextualizing those perks. And what they really needed to do was they needed to reinforce the empathy that the company was showing to the people in the organisation. Another example, in a school, it doesn't just have to be a business where these empathy nudges can be incredibly powerful. This was for a school, and this was just before a coding and robotics lesson. And girls, we know, can be apprehensive about technology because it's still very gendered. What they did is they put an inspirational quote from an inspirational woman that gave girls permission to succeed, just as they were about to start a technology lesson. Another thing they did was they rearranged the chairs. So they went from this grid-like structure, where everybody has their back to the wall, to this much more collaborative learning space. And that encouraged peer-to-peer learning and pair programming. And they saw an increase of GCSE computer science. My last example is for an automotive company. And what they did is they identified that the empathy deficit wasn't in the sales approach, but it was in the environment, right down to the signage, to the way you were greeted when you walked into the car dealership, through to the tie, this is Paul, the tie that Paul was wearing. And the tie actually symbolised that pushy sales approach. So they changed the tie, they changed the uniform, they changed the environment, and with all these nudges, they saw sales go up by 23%. Now, these things are not difficult. They're really not. I want us to create more workplaces like this, where empathy is at the heart of the organisations, where technology, it enhances our humanity, where empathy is measured and managed, and where we start to care about these really, really tiny things, because they dictate who belongs in a space. Empathy has the power to transform a workplace, and never have we needed it more than we need it today. Thank you very much.